watching Capitol View, Sunday morning talk focused on the political scene in Arkansas.
And welcome back to Capitol View. I'm Roby Brock.
And I'm David Goins. Let's really delve into something a lot of people are curious about. Polling. Who doesn't love polling, Roby, right?
We love polling. So
you've had the distinct opportunity to do another Talk Business Hendricks poll, which frankly greatly anticipated. So let's look at some of the things you're already learning from this poll. One of the real key questions that a lot of people want to know about, at least in Arkansas, given what we've got going on in D.C. with the government shutdown, who do Arkansans really kind of put at the blame for this one? So let's take a look
at some
that right now.
Takeaways here.
Very first, who do you blame for the government shutdown? 40% on your screen there. Blaming President Obama and the Democrats, 35%. Republicans in Congress, about a quarter of those who responded, Roby, equal to blame, and 1% say they don't know. So your takeaways from this?
Yeah, I think two really big takeaways from this, David, is number one, we see a complete reversal from what we see at the national level. We mirrored that question off of a CBS News poll. The Wall Street Journal and NBC News have come out with one that show Republicans to blame by Americans as a whole as high as 70%. But here in Arkansas, that number's in half, and you see Democrats with more of the blame. So some real interesting differences between national and state in there. And the other number that's a huge takeaway for me is this 1%.
Yeah, they don't know.
1% undecided is phenomenally low. I mean, that's a lot of people with very, very strong opinions there. So these numbers look pretty hard to me. And when you see some future numbers we're going to roll out here, you'll see that undecided, that don't know category is much larger on other issues.
So even people who aren't watching the news every day, everyone's got an opinion on this one. No question about it. Okay, question number two, at least for right now. Let's take a look at the job approval rating for President Obama, obviously in his second term. Maybe not as big a surprise here, Roby, given the job that Obama has done in Arkansas in 2008 and 2012. 34% approval rating, 62% not approving, and again, a pretty low don't know number, 4%. Your takeaway there?
Yeah, well, I think this is pretty consistent with what we've seen over a couple of years worth of polling. President Obama has consistently been low in the numbers here, mid-30s. We see him maybe just a point or two below what we've traditionally seen him at. So this 34% right here is not really that big of a difference from what we've seen previously.
Sure, makes sense. You asked a question about the president. Given we have a Senate race, we're going to ask a question about the current U.S. Senator Mark Pryor, who obviously, at least by some, has been aligned closely with the president on a voting record. The job rating for Senator Mark Pryor right now on your screen, 34% approve. That's very consistent with what we saw with the president. 48% disapproving, but a much larger 18%, almost 1 in 5 saying they don't know.
Yeah, this is not the number that Mark Pryor is going to want to have seen in these numbers right here, and it's actually lower from where we saw him in the early 40s several months ago when we asked a very similar question about job approval. But I think this is a reflection as well on dissatisfaction with Congress. So we didn't ask about Congressman Griffin or Tom Cotton or Senator Bozeman. I think we would see somewhat similar numbers in terms of approve, disapprove from all of the congressional delegation right now.
Okay, and the fourth and final question here on Capitol View this morning that we're going to take a closer look at, obviously, is this race for U.S. Senate between Mark Pryor and Congressman Tom Cotton. It was a who would you vote for if the election were today vote, Roby. 42-41, Pryor with a narrow lead, and again 17% saying they don't know.
Yeah, and again, if you look at this, David, in terms of what we just saw with Mark Pryor's job approval numbers at 34%, and you've got him at 42% over Tom Cotton, I think that's a big takeaway for Mark Pryor to say, I'm not as far behind in this race, or I am going to be very competitive in this race despite the headwinds of Obama having low approval ratings, Pryor having a low job approval rating, and still that 40% of Arkansans blaming the Democrats and President Obama for the government shutdown, yet he still is in a statistical dead heat, or you could even say he's up by 1 point on Tom Cotton. And the real key to that is when you look at how the independents break down, David. The independent voters, which have gone 2-to-1, 3-to-1, even 4-to-1 for Republican candidates in the last two election cycles, Tom Cotton's only got a 48 to 42% advantage among independents in that Mark Pryor race.
Certainly something to be watching for, but if you're, say, a rookie congressman like Tom Cotton is, and you're only down 1 percentage point this far out against a two-term U.S. senator, I think it's safe to say, both parties will, or both campaigns will probably have something to take away from that.
I will say that the poll numbers that we put out today, there's going to be a few presents under the Christmas tree for everyone. Everybody's going to pick and choose the numbers that they like, and they're going to put out press releases and talk about in terms of spin determine where they see the positives in that, and they'll play up the negatives as well for their opponents.
First poll, but not the last poll, right?
This is our benchmark as we go forward in future quarters, as we go forward up until, say, this time a year from now, which will be right before Election Day 2014. This will be the number that we'll be looking back on and saying, how does it compare to 1 year ago?
There we go. It's a Hendricks Talk Business poll. You saw it first here on Capitol View this morning. We'll be back to wrap things up after a quick break. I'm David Goins alongside Roby Brock. You're watching Capitol View on Sunday morning on KARK.